Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 926. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today's July 29th, 2025.
All right, thank you for joining us for another episode of Anglican Unscripted. And boy, do we have a list of show notes. What, you got 11 stories you sent me, George? Let me open that up. Several pages. So buckle up, sit back, relax, because you're going to be here for a while. I'll probably do a 2-hour show. Who knows? George, how you doing this week?
Busy. Mm-hmm. I'm actually starting to prepare for the start of Sunday schools, new school year in 3 weeks. School starts in late August here in Florida, and our Sunday school year starts the same as the public school year. So we're getting ready for it. Now, people don't know this, but every once in a while, when it's hot here in Maryland, I turn off the AC in the main room here so that you guys don't hear that zzz background. George has joined me this week. No AC. What's going on here in Florida? Well, the AC unit is frozen solid. And so the men's club, it's a wonderful thing to watch late middle-aged men trying to work on HVAC systems. Mm-hmm. Well, whack it with a hammer and get out a blowtorch to melt the ice, or turn it off, or turn the fan on but the AC off, or have we cleaned the fan? I don't get involved because the fun of being in the men's group is to take apart things then pay someone to fix it after we've got it all on the floor.
No, it's an amazing thing, the men's group. Like especially do you guys have Rogation Sunday? Where you fix up the church I go to has Rogation Sunday, where it's maintenance day at the church, and in 4 or 5 hours they do everything from painting the soffits to cleaning out the courts, the trees, the brushes. They wash down the gravestones. It's an amazing, well put together thing, taking care of all 3 or 4 acres of the property. It's much more controlled and less chaotic than you would assume from a bunch of middle-aged guys. They've been doing this since 1495 or whatever, so pretty crazy. All right, George, we should move on to the news. First note that comes up on my thing is the Bishop Ruch trial continues to blow up. We got a letter this week from Rachel the Bull. She's the assistant to the prosecutor, Mr. Runyon, and she has accused the ACNA leadership of misconduct by accessing her files before the court trial started, the files that explained stuff that was not to be shared with the defense, George.
Just for our viewers, this is not the daughter of Sammy the Bull Gravano. Rachel Thibault is a French name, with Kevin's wonderful way of pronouncing it. So Rachel Thibault is Runyon's assistant. She's an attorney. She's a former assistant communications director for the ACNA. We've known her professionally for maybe 10 years.
At least a decade.
Long time. Yeah. She's a young girl, and she has been forced to resign by the ACNA central office. And she's released a letter detailing that supports the accusations and allegations made by Alan Runyon, the former provincial prosecutor in the Ruch trial. And we've published this letter on Anglican Ink. And the letter is quite damning because it raises, essentially, if we take the plain statement, and Rachel's a lawyer, and I've known her to be an honorable, you get a nose for people who you can trust and who you can't trust. And we have one story where we have archbishops making statements at the end of our broadcast where I don't believe a word they're saying. And then we have other things where
we tell our audience that,
yeah. And then we have people who say, I believe it because I trust her. Rachel has detailed a pattern of misconduct in the management of the Ruch trial. And the conclusion I reach is that a member of the trial court is seeking to throw the case, to find Stuart Ruch not guilty.
In our opinion.
In our opinion. And the facts are that a member of the trial court went to the chief operating officer of the Anglican Church in North America and asked for access to the prosecution's files, a particular file, the investigation of Stuart Ruch. This was not, and it was granted permission by the chief operating officer. Now, first off, this is a no-no. What in God's name was the COO thinking to interfere in the internal mechanics of a trial? So in some states, this would be illegal because you cannot, unless...
Depending on what the employees signed when they started with the company, I, as an IT professional, go over these documents. I'm responsible for about 35 people being fired for this type of misconduct, for allowing unfettered access to documents they're not allowed to touch.
Okay. So first off, we have two issues. A member of the trial court is asking for specific files by name that are held by the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And the COO, without telling the prosecution, gives them access to this file. And decision was made a month before the trial began and was not disclosed to any of the parties, any of the other members of the trial court. Once the trial began, this court member then used this information that they had gathered from the files, which the court had already ruled would not be discussed in this case. In other words, we were going to accept that the investigation was fair, and we were going to accept its results. We're not going to challenge the veracity of the investigation. The court member then, in the trial itself, began to use this information to impeach the integrity of the prosecution and ask questions and make adverse statements about the investigatory process. This is as clear a case, and Runyon, this is why Runyon resigned, and said, this is irreparably tainted. I asked that the transcripts be released so that people can see what has happened. Now, I was not there. I've not read the transcripts. I've only read what Rachel Thibault has written, what Alan Runyon has written, and the responses given to us by the ACNA. And part of our job, Kevin, is to weigh the merits of different things. And right now, it looks to me like there either is a deliberate or an unconscious effort to throw the trial. Alan Runyon is gone. A new prosecutor, and the choice was given to Stuart Wood to adhere to the advice of the prosecutor or not. And he chose not to, and he brought in a new prosecutor. Well, the ACNA 2 people, who are the lay, if you will, litigants in this case, but are not being recognized as such by the court, immediately cried foul because Job Serebrov, the new prosecutor, is tied to Stuart Ruch's Greenhouse Initiative, or Green...
That's right, it's Greenhouse, yeah.
Greenhouse Initiative. And there's not an arm's length distance between the prosecutor and the defendant in this case. Mm-hmm. So where things stand right now is basically they're trying to figure out what to do next.
It's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess.
Damage control is not being done. Okay. And we're in one of these situations, you and I have been in this point where we know the press person doesn't know what to do because they're not being told by the boss what to do. So if they say a word, either way, either get in trouble with us, the press and the world, or with their boss. And so they best shut down and see which way things go. This ties into a bigger picture of now, if this were normal times, if we did not live in an eras of atom shifts and all this and that, of where trust in institutions and the press, the media, government, the church leadership was at an all-time low, this really wouldn't matter. It's a screw up, oh boy, we've got a mess here, but we can figure it out. When you do this sort of thing in this atmosphere of mistrust in the institutions, where the assumption is not now that you're honest, but the assumption is we're assuming you're sort of corrupt, and then you act in a way that a reasonable person could assume corruption. I'm sorry, the ACNA, the bloom is off the rose. If you guys, the whole thing was, we're not the Episcopal Church. Well, I'm sorry, there must be something in the Anglican DNA that within a generation, you're becoming the Episcopal Church. Pressuring low-level subordinates to resign because you're truth-telling, fixing trials, the buddy system, giving certain people preferences over other people, having shady, well, at the least, someone should be fired. In my opinion, someone should be fired at the ACN office. And this is the sort of thing that will bring down Steve Wood at the end if he doesn't do anything, because it will basically taint him as being a dishonest man who leads a dishonest organization. And that's where the signs are pointing right now. And you and I know that's not true because we weren't there with the beginning.
Here we are. Boom. Be sure your bishops are above reproach. Why? Why would we do that? Well, because you're going to get this is why you get to a point where hold on, who can we trust here? Now, you should instantly be able to say, well, I trust the ACNA, and I trust the Archbishop, and I trust the process, and I trust the canons and the systems that were set up to handle accountability. Now, Anglican TV for 20 years has been about accountability, making sure that when we form a new organization, we report and record accountability, because that's what took down the Episcopal Church. So if my face is getting red here and I'm a little angry, it's because you found yourself in a mess, and now you're in the no-win situation because you've lost the ability to be above reproach.
We're also in the social media era, Kevin, where there are no secrets anymore. On Facebook and Twitter, we're seeing insiders attack other insiders. The wife of a former archbishop attacked one key person in this thing for being disloyal by bringing up the corruption. How dare you make this thing public? We need to circle the wagons and hold together. What is that all about?
That's how this works.
That's not how this works. So in other words, what needs to happen, in my opinion, right now, the College of Bishops and the ACNA need to take a good hard look at themselves and say, what are we doing wrong? Now, you're always going to have human failings. There are always going to be mistakes. There are always going to be stupid people doing stupid things. But when the institution is perceived to seek its preservation over the gospel truth, over righteousness, then you've got a big problem.
Well, one of the big problems is there's so many big problems here. Websites like the ACNA 2, ACNA 2, early on, they reported, in my opinion, just hearsay. Okay, there was not a lot of legitimacy to what they were reporting. It was more reactionary. Now they got some stories in there, if you guys want to go check it out, that have legitimacy, and there's good information. And I find I am internally very disappointed in the actions of some bishops in handling of crises related to other clergy in the diocese that they've not handled correctly. And I don't know, the ACNA deserves to do better. They're capable of doing better. They have done better in the past, and as a supporter, fan, a person always rooting for the ACNA, it's difficult to report on this, but as you know, Anglican Unscripted has always reported, fairly on these type of topics.
Kevin, we're reaching a point. People unload on me all the time. How can you still remain an Episcopalian, an Episcopal priest, and do all this stuff in light of the corruption of your leadership? And I'll come back to, well, it doesn't touch me personally, doesn't affect my life in my parish here. And that's all true. But I'm starting to hear that sort of thing from ACNA people. What's happening in the trial doesn't affect me. It doesn't, affect my parish here. That same disconnect, that same, some people call it double-mindedness, that I've had to adopt in order to maintain my standing within the Episcopal Church. Now the leaders of the ACNA are requesting of its members, be double-minded. Be truthful here, be slavishly obedient there. Mm-hmm. And the ACNA should be better than that.
Yeah. I mean, and on paper, they're doing great. The province is growing. The dioceses are growing. What is happening as far as reaching this nation with the gospel? Good. Keep up that good work. However, there's internal problems that are coming to light that will destroy the ACNA. And part of that is your inability.
We'll get to one of those stories a little later.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah. It's no longer just the women's orders issue. It's the inability now of the ACNA to conduct accountability with its bishops. Mm-hmm. I go to a church here in Maryland, and about my fourth or fifth weekend, we had a visit from the bishop. And during the Q&A downstairs in the basement, one of the leaders of the church, who his family's been in this church for generations, said, how do we know that this won't happen in the ACNA? What happened in the tech? How do we know this isn't going to be history repeating itself? Great question. The bishop didn't answer correctly because, it was a surprise question. The answer is we know because the ACNA, up until the bishop's visit last fall, has always conducted itself to be accountable, has held its bishop and clergy accountable. It's amazing, if you look back in the 20 years that we've been reporting, how many bishops have been let go by the College of Bishops of the ACNA. Don't find that in the Episcopal Church. Don't find that in the Lutheran Church. You don't find that anywhere else. There was a good set of accountability and follow through by the ACNA. This one is this trial is not I don't know.
Actually, I'll take a slight disagreement with you.
No.
The grass have crossed, Kevin.
Uh-huh.
So that in the past 5 years, there has been more effective discipline of bad Episcopal bishops than there have been of ACNA bishops.
Okay. Good.
There's, in the last 5-10 years, 5 years.
I'd say 5.
There have been swifter, more straightforward actions against errant bishops. Now, is it perfect? Far from it. We've got a case in the Diocese of New York that with St. Thomas Fifth Avenue that looks like it's going to be a wonderful case, and it'll soon make it into the New York Times, and then the Episcopal Church can't hide it anymore, covering up abuse at the choir school. It's not perfect, far from it, but the mindset is in the right place. And I don't think ACNA partisans want to hear that the old enemy is actually now doing better than they are in a certain area.
Yeah. This isn't rocket science. The entirety of the New Testament is about accountability. If Paul were still around, the ACNA would be getting a letter. Just saying. Okay. there would have been books written about tech, but and I, do I have a problem reporting on it? No, because we are about accountability. That's been the message of Unscripted all this time. 926 episodes. I wish I didn't have to. But if my reporting it helps you guys straighten up, let's go with that.
A few moments later.
I just got a breaking news item that I want to interrupt our flow of stories.
Okay.
Because the Indians will still be corrupt next week.
Okay.
Steve Woods just put out a letter, and let me read the pertinent paragraph. The past few days have presented a great challenge for our Anglican Church. As you may be aware, on Friday, a now former employee of the province, that's Rachel Thibault, who was assisting in the prosecution for the ecclesiastical trial that is currently before the court of the trial of a bishop, widely circulated a letter to individual members and clergy across the province that levels serious but misguided allegations against me, provincial chancellor, the executive director of the province, and the court. The letter suggests that we acted unethically and compromised the integrity of the church. These accusations set a wave of pain and confusion and division rippling across our province. In response, on Monday I convened the two standing governing bodies of our church, the College of Bishops and the Executive Committee, to evaluate the allegations and accusations against me and my staff in light of all available documentation and information, and ask them to determine what steps are necessary to guide the church forward at this time. I typed a statement expressing their concern from these meetings. So we have Steve Wood basically saying Rachel Thibault's statement is misguided, but he needs to respond to it. So he brings together the bishops, and they put out a statement. If I'm looking at it right now, we express our regret and confusion and hurt caused by the attempts to air concerns. We are saddened apart. Basically, the bishops, after one day with no investigation, have whitewashed this process. So not only has, not denied the facts, he's called them misguided, but now after a one-day meeting with no investigation, no independence, the College of Bishops and the Executive Committee have affirmed that it's a rotten. That's my opinion. So, these guys, we've been through this before through the Chuck Murphy fiasco. And I'm seeing the Chuck Murphy thing coming back again. Somebody who cannot be challenged, who cannot be wrong, who humility is something else other people practice. But I, the golden boy, cannot be touched or have my integrity impugned in any way. I'm sorry. I don't believe you. And there's no reason why I should or why anybody else should. That's just George.
Well, interesting to hear this. I'm going to have to read the document myself at a later time. It's Tuesday. I don't know.
This is how bad they do these things. This was all done yesterday. And if they want to prepare a landing, you need to write to the people who cover this professionally and say, okay, this is what we're saying. There's more, they just do such a bad job.
Their communication skills at this current point are lacking, and we've talked about this now for at least a month.
So they're basically saying, the fellows who follow this, there will be that group, my way or the highway, my team right or wrong, my archbishop. He was nice to me in a pastoral way 10 years ago, therefore he's always right. Then there's somebody like me who's seen repeated missteps, who's not too sure about some of the things he said. I have to admit, I first met Alan Runyon when I helped the Diocese of South Carolina in its litigation 15, 20 years ago, when I did research on whether the Dennis Canon passed the 1979 General Convention.
It did not.
And I've known Rachel Thibault for a long time. And if you're asking me to balance whose integrities I trust, well, there's no question about it.
I trust the prosecution.
Rubbishing Thibault and Runyon. I'm sorry. It's just, well.
George, let's move on to our second story. Tensions are getting higher in the UK, where President Trump just recently visited and made a tariff deal that seems to be very good because my stocks are way up. Thank you, President Trump. And the tensions are up because they have an immigration problem, George. We've talked about this before. Last week I alluded to Europe is lost. You don't have replacement population. Your culture is going to be replaced by the people that are immigrating to your country just based on statistics, and it's a generation away. It's lost. There is nothing at this point you can do except, the word now is re-immigration, send them back. That would be the only thing to do.
It's extraordinary because reading the comments on the last episode on this particular point, we had two groups. One, people saying, you hit the nail on the head. I'm an Englishman and I don't recognize my country anymore. Or I'm an Englishwoman and I can't go down the high street anymore because of the way the culture's changed. And then we have other people say, what are you people talking about? You're absolute lunatics. Everything is fine. It's wonderful.
I know where they get their news.
So we're actually being presented with people are living in two worlds. One is Gotham City, the hellhole, and the other is a sort of a little St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple English village with a constable on his bicycle, and everything is sweet and wonderful. And and I don't want to say reality because I don't want to be defining reality anymore, but there are daily protests in England that are not covered in the mainstream press, but are covered in social media. And for instance, last week we talked about the Bells Hotel in Epping on the Essex side of east side of London. Protests about housing these male immigrants in a hotel, and they're soliciting children in the parks and whatnot. And finally, the Bishop of Chelmsford, Gully Frances de Coney, issues a statement. And she's touted as the odds makers say that she's most likely next Archbishop of Canterbury. And if her, God help the Church of England if it is, because her actions in this crisis are the worst of the English fudge. She's released a statement with the area bishop and the local archdeacon and the local vicar, essentially saying, isn't it terrible that these little girls are being assaulted, and we feel for the people, but we also need to be nice to everybody and welcome the stranger in our midst and all this and that. Precisely saying nothing that isn't being said by there's no Christian virtue in anything. It's just mealy-mouthed niceness. No leadership, no standing for gospel principles, no defending the people of the Christians of Epping against a culture that seeks to destroy them, to replace them, to crush them. And someone who's a refugee from Iran, of all people, should know this. Her own brother was murdered by the Ayatollahs.
Yeah.
And instead we get this and it's a shame, really.
Well, hold on. There's now laws that prevent her from posting on social media or making comments that are anti-immigration. Maybe she's just she's probably just staying within the law. If you don't know, there's a new law in England that allows a certain division of the police to search the internet for anti-immigration comments and to flag those and seek persecution for those who conduct themselves in such a way as to offend immigrants.
Yeah, they want to prosecute people who are anti-immigrant in their posts on social media. it was funny at the press conference with Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. Somebody says, Keir Starmer can now censor you, Donald Trump. And Trump said, what are you talking about? Well, Truth Social, he can now shut it down if somebody posts something that's anti-immigrant. Now, that will probably affect us eventually. It'll probably start off with we're having to close comments from people in the UK. Now, it's all said, we need to protect children from pornography. And that excuse lasted one day before the government began to censor social media posts about immigration protests. So the whole pornography thing was a fig leaf, a lie, just to allow censorship of ideas that the government didn't approve of. So our English viewers, and that's a good, 40% of our people view from England.
43%. Yeah.
40. Depending upon if we get on the radar for this new crack police squad, probably not. You're going to find that your comments are blocked, and you won't see our Twitter posts because Twitter will get a complaint from the police, and they'll have to investigate it. And they've got so many thousands of people to investigate. By the time to get to us, a month will have passed, and our post will be blocked until we show not to be pornography, but just two cranky old men.
Well, sadly, companies like Google, YouTube is owned by Google, already have agreements with the government that they will give management ability to the government to just flag them already. And therefore, you won't know you've been blocked. You can post all you want, but it's hidden from the rest of the world. You will see your comment. You'll see everyone else's comment, but us people in America will not see the comment of an English person because they've been flagged by the government. Twitter won't do that. That's owned by Elon Musk, but
we've already seen that with Hong Kong. The Chinese, some of our viewers who are Hong Kong based have told us that some of our stuff doesn't get through the filters when we talk about when we hit Chinese issues. Surprise, surprise, those things don't make it through the filter.
That's weird.
And we're in a world where the CCP controlled Hong Kong is now closer to the British government of Keir Starmer than it is. Kevin, it's all been downhill since Tony Blair went in, but hey, I'm not going to get into that.
Tony Blair.
97, Diana died, England went to hell. There you go.
No, I don't, it's hard to watch. Now, I loved reading 1940s, 50s, and 60s sci-fi and dystopian books, 1984, name the author. And Europe, and especially London, was always the headquarters for the dystopian government of the time. And I get that now. These authors were way ahead of the schedule, Airship One, what was it called? But whatever. So,
Airstrip One.
Airstrip One. Crazy. Let's move on to our next story. And this is just to raise our ratings. Calvin Robinson has been released from the ACC. Friend of the show. We love him. It's an official removal, and he has not been thrown out. He's not been put under trial. He's not been accused of wrongdoing, immorality, or anything like that. It's kind of just like they give him transfer papers.
The Trinitarian, which is the official publication of the Anglican Catholic Church, in their July issue, published a statement saying that Father Calvin Robinson had been released and removed from the Holy Orders of the Anglican Catholic Church under Canon 10.8. No commentary. Now, if you remember, Calvin Robinson is our clickbait. We can get people to watch just by putting him the name in the title. If we can find a way to get Justin Bieber, Calvin Robinson, and
Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift
in a show, we will have found the magic formula for Anglicanism. Canon 10.8. Now, Calvin's detractors have accused him of misconduct, of various sins, and have pointed that he's been in a number of different churches and he can't seem to stay in any of them, and it's because he's a bad character. That's been the rap. Well, the official release from and his last archbishop, Mark Haverland, has basically been bad-mouthing Calvin about saying he's this, that, and the other. I'm not going to repeat the criticisms. You can look them up on Anglican Inc. But Calvin, Article 10.8, Canon 10.8, is specifically for someone with no misconduct. And this is a voluntary renunciation. So Calvin is basically being let go to another church, not because he is somehow deficient, not because he's guilty of anything or even suspected of anything. If there were other canonical remedies. So all the filth thrown at Calvin, you may love him, you may hate him, but let's stick to the truth here. No, he has not been kicked out of any denomination. He's not been disciplined by the ACC for being a bad apple. No. His current status is he's talking to Bishop Robert Giffen of the Anglican Province of America about he and his parish in Grand Rapids going in. I don't know where that stands. I don't agree with every issue Calvin is on. I don't need to. But I do think that he is someone who I always enjoy and wish him well.
I appreciate Calvin. He's always willing to come on the program. And when I did my interview with Calvin, he answered every question, even the uncomfortable ones. And I can't get archbishops to do that, So let's just be upfront here. He's honest. He tells you what he thinks, and that's what we do. Now he has detractors, and he has made some missteps that you probably shouldn't do in the age of social media. So let's move on to our next two.
And he's also trying to find his footing in an American scene versus a British scene.
Sure.
Because American conservatism is not a British conservatism. And some things that are, there's some potholes he's been stepping in. They're not fatal, but it's just the differences between the environments in which we're operating.
Let's move on to our next story. If people don't know, for the next 3 or 4 years, I'm here in Maryland. Maryland is served by the Diocese of the Mid-Atlantic. Therefore, Bishop Chris Warner is technically my bishop. George and I have told people in the audience many times in the past, the safest people in the world are our bishops. We take great care in trying to do reporting when we talk about the bishops who we serve under. And we will do the same here with Chris. We do the same with Central Florida. And so let's move on. Chris Warner is being accused of bullying in a controversy over women's orders. He's been accused by the Incarnation Anglican Church in Williamsburg, and they have filed a complaint with Steve Wood, the Archbishop of the ACNA, George.
We've been aware, we Anglican Unscripted, Anglican Inc. have been aware of this controversy for several months because we've been given copies of the papers that have been passed back and forth. We have contacted Bishop Warner's office for response, and we've never had a response.
Yeah, not really. You can't do that. You got to respond.
And I'm really, but at the same time, I really don't want to throw everything out there that's all one-sided.
Right.
So we've sort of held back. Well, A Living Text, which is a website, which I encourage people to look at, has finally collected all these papers and given a detailed summary of the case so far. And I mustered up my courage and posted a link to that and basically brought that into our worldview in encouraging people to look at this. The issue is Incarnation Anglican Church has been moving away from the women's orders position, meaning that the vestry and its clergy were no longer felt that this was, part of God's revelation for the world. Diocese of the Mid-Atlantic has women priests, and its bishops, John Guernsey and now Bishop Warner, have been supporters of women's ordination. Well, they went through an interim, and the accusation is that the canon of the ordinary, Mary Margaret Hayes, was sent in and basically bullied the vestry and got people to resign and held elections so that the opponents of women orders were pushed out. Interim priests were basically demoted, and I can only report what has been alleged by one side.
Right.
So I don't know if this is true or not. But given the trajectory and all the documents, it looks pretty likely. Long and the short of it is Bishop Warner is being accused of not honoring the two integrities understanding of Anglicanism in the ACNA.
Dual integrities.
Women's orders, those who support and those who oppose women orders.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, he's being accused of enforcing a regime that if you're in this diocese, you will welcome women priests come hell or high water. That's not the understanding of how the ACNA was formed and how it operates amongst each other. And so there are complaints that have now been lodged with Archbishop Wood saying, look, Bishop Warner is alleged to be in violation of the Constitution and canons, conduct on becoming a bishop, and taking impermissible liberties with the consciences and faith of members of Incarnation Anglican, when if Incarnation were in the REC or the Diocese of Fort Worth, they would be perfectly fine and normal. So
there's many dioceses where there is equal treatment and dual treatment of the topic, and I've belonged to some of those. There's other dioceses that I've attended where there isn't equal treatment, it is the mission of the bishop to be sure that his will goes forward. Now, isn't that the role of the bishop, though? If we talk about the episcopacy, do we not, having my ears to the ground here in Maryland, one of the comments I heard by one of the priests was, well, he is the bishop.
Kevin, I would be surprised. You go to Accokeek, which was one of the first churches to break with the Diocese of Washington over Jane Dixon, its bishop. And if somebody at Accokeek is saying, well...
No, I didn't name that church.
Then I'm thinking, whoa, there's a culture change, because, Accokeek was one of the flag bearers in the march against Episcopal bullying.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're getting it. Maybe there's something in the DNA of Anglican episcopacy that they just don't understand the charism of what it means to be a bishop. There's this idea, well, you're the chief liturgical officer, or you're the chief operating officer, or this and that. None of those really are the job of the bishop. And it takes us back to the, if you will, age-old Anglican question, what is a bishop for? Mm-hmm. And we really still don't have a good answer to that question.
Well, this topic, women's orders, is the hardest topic to get people to talk about. And I will not name names. I promise I won't name names. But there are people very high up in the ACNA who oppose women's orders but refuse to say a thing. They keep their head down. If I named them, you would be, your jaw would hit the absolute floor. There's people high up in the American side of GAFCON who oppose women's orders, who, if I name them, your jaw would hit the floor below the floor that your jaw just hit. But they don't want to wrinkle a feather. They don't want to cause disunity. For them, unity is more important than that issue. Okay. I have a person who comes on the program who tells me in email or verbal form before he comes on, he will not talk about women's orders. I'll talk about anything you want to talk about. Anything. But this bishop will not talk about women's orders. Doesn't want to cause disunity. So, yeah. One of those things, George. Let's move on to our next topic. We're going to go way over to Mother Russia.
Now, occasionally, Kevin and occasionally you and I get attacked because we are not in the Ukraine, always Ukraine camp. I mean, war is bad. It's terrible the Russians attacked Ukraine, but then there's that mindset that we must fight to the death of the last Ukrainian to preserve.
Right. Anybody who knows Kevin and the sports teams I love knows that I always support the underdog. It's in my DNA. And so I may come off sometimes as pro-Ukrainian, yet I am anti-war and I'm anti-continued war. So, yeah, we get a lot of complaints sometimes, George. Russian Orthodox Church bows, and boy, did they bow to Putin, and changes their doctrine on who can cohabitate with who and be recognized. Let's talk about Kirill. Kirill. Or Cyril, if you translate in English.
Yeah, Cyril or Kirill.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're accused of being pro-Russian because we're not sufficiently pro-Ukrainian, or we defer to the Russian Orthodox. So here's a chance to upset everybody.
Yes.
A law was put forward in the Duma, the Russian parliament, that's backed by the Putin regime, to give the status of the girlfriends of dead soldiers war widow status, meaning pensions and, state recognition. That if you cohabited with somebody and then you were drafted and sent off to the front and died, your girlfriend would be compensated as if she were your lawful spouse. Well, some members of the Duma have objected to this, saying this undermines the state and Christian understanding of marriage. One man, one woman for life. And then Kirill gets in and said, well, this could be an exception to Orthodox teaching on marriage because it would be a morale booster for the Russian state in our holy war against the Ukrainians. So we think it's okay and we will give our blessing to posthumous marriages, if you will. If your boyfriend goes off to war and he gets killed, the state will make you a war widow, and the Russian church will bless that relationship. Now, the conservative lay people in the Duma are saying, wait a second, wait, our doctrine of marriage says no. Cohabitation is sinful. That's called, fornication. We don't do that as Christians, and we shouldn't have the state back fornication. And it's the church in the form of Kirill the Patriarch who's saying, don't worry about it. Vlad, baby, he wants it. We'll let Vlad have it.
It's for Mother Russia. It's for the Holy War. Now, churches in the past have done things that make you say, I'll just mention the Roman Catholic Church allowed nuns to take contraception when they found themselves in places that they were likely to be raped.
Well,
there's
one of the maybe there's a safe places George doesn't want to go.
You don't want to go down that road, huh?
I don't want to go down that road.
So it's interesting from the Russian Orthodox Church, whom never divided.
So for our rather fierce people who say orthodoxy is unchanged and never will change and is always wonderful, Exhibit 1, Kirill, posthumous marriage.
Yeah. On to our next story. A person I never knew has joined Trinity Seminary as a new seminary professor, and the internet blew up. Interesting. Professor Matthew Barrett has joined Trinity Anglican Seminary, and he is a former Baptist. And on his way out, apparently he wrote a couple bridge-burning notes on social media, and we get to talk about it on Unscripted, George.
Yeah, he was a professor at a Southern Baptist seminary and very prominent in the Southern Baptist world, and I, too, had never heard of him. I don't read theology for pleasure, and I don't follow the Baptist Church. And he withdrew and is worshiping in an ACNA church in Kansas City right now, and has been given a position at Trinity Seminary and will be a professor there. And he's written some articles about why he became an Anglican. And they're all fun and nice, and we've linked to them. But he also wrote articles about why I can't be a Baptist. And he turned over a hornet's nest. And all the skinny jean, plaid shirt,
Bearded.
tightly shaved, bearded fellows have exploded on the internet in anger and outrage against this guy, Barrett, Dr. Barrett, and against Anglicans for being closet Catholics, and half of us are gay anyway. And part of Barrett's, so all the old prejudices are coming out in stereo. Barrett, the Southern Baptists are debating whether or not to have the Nicene Creed as a former doctrinal statement.
Yeah.
And the Baptists have always said no creeds, no confession, but the Bible.
It's the Bible, yeah.
Not against it, but we're not saying you must have this because this is in addition to Scripture. Well, Barrett disagrees with that stance, and he also disagrees with many of the Baptists' dismissal of church fathers and Augustine and some of their issues. And he has been persuaded of the truth claims of the Reformed Anglican way. So this is not somebody who's on his way to become a Catholic. In other words, he's not sliding this way because he likes bells and smells, and rather he is persuaded by the Anglican Reformation and the church fathers of our denominations and faith. So he's sliding into the Anglican world because he's persuaded it's true. This has, if you will, set the world on fire and basically pointed out that sometimes you just don't know how much other people dislike you until these things come out. And I just did not know that Baptists still look at the Anglican world, not just Episcopalians, but the ACNA, as closet Catholics who must be avoided, at all costs.
Last year,
we dress up because we're all transvestites. Geez,
who knows? Last year, I went to my class reunion back in Wisconsin. I'm not going to tell you where, because you look up this church and get this guy in trouble. But the Baptist church in town where I went to high school, now this new rector or pastor, that pastors, has introduced weekly Eucharist. He insists upon it. The church is in absolute turmoil. What next? A creed? It's like, and it's fun to talk to some of my Christian friends at the class reunion about what's going on with the Southern Baptists. They're great church planters. They do great missional work. They've done great work throughout time, but they are the original warring faction of Christianity. They've been fighting wars we never heard of before. And, it's, oh, you were involved in the sex wars of the Episcopal Church. Yeah, but I'm not a Baptist. Well, whatever. Let's hit some readers' questions. Every time we go through the comments, a lot of commenters say, well, you don't answer a lot of our questions here. Well, we don't, so we're going to do it today. And we're coming up on 50 minutes. That's not bad. Question number 1. Pope Leo is continuing Pope Francis's teaching that Muslims and Catholics worship the same God. George?
Yeah, one of our viewers on the question said, well, you really not talked about Leo and Islam, and is he going to stay in the Francis vein of... And Francis held that Muslims and Catholics worship the same God. I don't believe that. That's my personal statement. I believe that Islam is a false religion. I believe it's demonically sourced. And I do not believe they worship the God that I worship. But Leo...
hold on. I should make the same statement. I believe you can identify the God by the fruits that religion produces. And the fruits of Islam are absolutely evil. So.
It's not that I'm saying that all Muslims are bad. Far from it.
No.
The people who've been nastiest to me in this life have been Episcopalians, members of my own tribe. So,
yes.
No, I'm not attacking individuals. I'm just attacking a religion which I believe to be false. Well, in his address on May 19th to representatives of other churches and ecclesial communities and other religions, Leo referred to Muslims and Jews as brothers and sisters. Now, this wasn't a biological or the family of man statement, all children of Adam, but rather this was a theological statement that we worship the same God, even though we do through different means and doctrinal formulations. And I've wrote down some notes looking at this statement from May 19th. In speaking to Muslim attendees, Leo observed that Catholic-Muslim relations, quote, have been marked by a growing commitment to dialogue and fraternity. And then he went on to reference the third paragraph of Nostra Aetate, the Vatican II Declaration from 1965, in which the Church for the first time made positive statements about the faith tradition of Muslims. Leo referred to the Christian Catholics' esteem for Islam and for Muslims who worship the God who is one, living and subsistent, merciful and almighty. He sounds a lot like King Charles. Much to admire in Islam is what Leo says and what Charles says. I disagree with both of them, but I'm not an ecumenical or interfaith scholar. I just don't see.
So, because we know people in the field, I know people who work in Islamic countries, or we call the Islamic front line, who would agree with Pope Leo just to be part into the conversation. Mm-hmm. It would get this person into the conversation with somebody of the Islamic faith and saying, hey, we do worship the same God, you're just doing it wrong. Let me show you how to worship him the authentic Christian way. Mm-hmm. So it would be a ministry stance. That's not what Pope Leo is doing here, George.
Well, he's not put as much emphasis as Francis has, but he's certainly not changing anything Francis has put into place. Mm-hmm. So that was where I think our correspondent or our viewer was going. What's happening with that? And the answer is not good, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. Okay, on to our next story. Let's talk about relations at the executive Anglican Communion level between GAFCON and the Global South. You have in our next story a question from a reader. What's up with GSFA's Covenant and GAFCON? Why the silence between the two organizations? And it's a bigger issue because the heyday of the Global South and GAFCON's relationship together was probably right after the last Lambeth. That's when the unity between the two organizations, they got together, they said, GAFCON, you're part of the evangelical wing of Anglicanism. Global South, you're part of the restructuring, getting a hold of Canterbury and saying, what the hell are you trying to do here? And now there's silence between the two of them. They're not talking. There doesn't seem to be publicly a lot of communication. And let's talk about that, George.
Yeah, what's going on in the global world? The answer is nothing. We're in a vacuum period. Foley Beach was heavily invested in GAFCON and the Global South. He was an officer in both organizations. With his retirement, Archbishop Wood has not taken up those roles. He has different
absolutely
focuses of interest. And with the Canterbury vacant, there's really no visible enemy. And so what's happened is that we've now entered a vacuum again. And we're back to the good old days of it's Nigeria versus Uganda versus Kenya versus Sydney versus ACNA and versus Singapore. All these different characters, new leaders at the top, new people seeking to influence others, trying to build relationships. And there's nobody. When Steve Noel was active in the ACNA, there was a constant drumbeat of the province and the Anglican Covenant, the Jerusalem Declaration. People knew what we stood, what the ACNA stood for, what it believed, and it was, if you will, there was a catechesis of sorts.
Sure.
That all Anglicans picked up. There's nobody doing that now, for both GAFCON or the Global South, and so inertia and laziness being the two great virtues of all churches, including my own. Nobody's talking about it. With nobody talking about it, there's no action. No action. There's no interest. No interest, no money. And if you're not asking questions or raising money, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, they're having a meeting next year. We reported on that.
They're having a meeting. GAFCON's having a meeting for bishops in Abuja, Nigeria, and we have to ask ourselves: is it worth the time and expense and treasure? And are we too old to fly halfway around the world?
Oh, my back. Yeah.
But have we passed? And that's the question: have we reached the point where these global organizations have lost their attractiveness? In other words, if I look at our viewership, I can always get people to read a Calvin Robinson story. I can always get people to read a scandal story, a story about inter-Anglican international affairs. That's a very specific audience that is interested in that, and most clergy, who are basically the bulk of our audience, are committed lay people. They really don't care anymore.
No, in fact, we have a newer audience. When we started this channel, we had, 500 subscribers. They were all the core Anglican. Many of the Anglican influencers at the time would watch. We now have a subscription base of 11,000 people who come here to listen to two guys talk about transparent issues within Christianity and specifically Anglicanism. Have the Anglican leadership that we relied on for news sources lost their focus? Yes, because the ACNA was the new kid in town. It was fun to talk about, fun to support. They threw their support into the ACNA. Now the ACNA is a success, and it doesn't really need the support of GAFCON and the Global South like it used to. ACNA is going to do just fine. Yeah, I got some big problems right in front here internally, but the ACNA has matured. GAFCON itself has matured, but it's gone through leadership cycles where there's nobody in GAFCON right now who started GAFCON. And that's just part of an aging group, and provinces turn over the leadership all the time, and Global South the same way. The bigger issue here is what happened years ago when the fabric of the Anglican Communion was torn. There was nobody there from the Archbishop of Canterbury to say, stop, wait a minute, we need to refocus and hold accountability. When you have a global church like the Anglican Communion and the provinces aren't working together, this is what you get. This is the mud of Anglicanism. Now, when they have a common enemy in Catherine Jefferts Schori, a common enemy in the Archbishop of Canterbury, or some other dysfunctional province, they do come together. But you're not going to hear their voices when things are completely broken like they are now, or when things look good. Why would you? Hey, George, we're an hour in here. Let's keep going with the stories. We should probably skip a couple stories here. What do you think we could skip?
Well, let's mention the Church of England newspaper because it's dead, but it'll still be dead next year, next week.
No, let's do that. We can do the famine thing next week or next episode, maybe Friday. And we can do the bishop story and the choir will be fun. We'll do that next week too. So let's move on and talk about the Church of England newspaper. Now, there was a time when every paper across the nation and mostly around the world had a religious reporter who would cover religious topics. And once a week or twice a week, he would post his little column about the new garden that First Baptist Church put in, or a new pastor. There was always a story for a religious reporter to cover. They were usually also in charge of the obituary page. We've moved beyond that. There is no longer papers with religious reporters, even at the big papers like the Telegraph, the New York Times. I think they still have one, but every paper had its religious reporter. Because these times have changed, we find stewards of even Christian reporting are disappearing as well. And one of those George worked for.
I worked for the Church of England newspaper for about 20 years as their chief correspondent, had my little name on the masthead and everything. That was the first, it was founded in 1828, and it published weekly until last week, when its editor, Andrew Carey, instead of having the newspaper come out, sent an email to subscribers saying, "I'm sorry, we're ceasing publication." The publisher, Keith Young, had died, and he basically kept the newspaper afloat as they say in business, a vanity project. It was an income.
Yeah.
It was he had other titles, and this one was more of a prestige thing. And it's like why Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, not to make money, but to have a bit of a standing. Yeah. Well, he didn't make any provisions. He died. No money's going to go forward. And the old time church newspaper is dead. We have two that's sort of left, Church Times and Living Church. I've written for both. I was a correspondent for Living Church for about 10 years until change of editorship. They got rid of me. They're kept alive because they have trusts in back of them. They're not ongoing businesses. Church Times has a trust. Living Church has a trust, so that they raise money, and they're not profit-making business entities. So they will probably be around a little bit longer, but the writing is on the wall for the old style of how we do newspapers, certainly specialty newspapers.
Well, Anglican Ink and Unscripted and TV are different in that we don't make a profit either. Okay, through advertising on Anglican Ink and the ads you see before you watch Anglican Unscripted, we take in about $150 a month, which pays for the servers and the upkeep and maintenance. And if George drops his microphone, we send George a new microphone. It keeps the lights on, so to speak. There is no money in religious news. You can't make a profit doing it. We do this because we love our church. We do this because part of the charism God gave us is to be stewards of this type of information. And for some reason, we have a great friendship. And in that friendship, you guys like to watch. And God uses that. And as long as God's using Anglican TV, my dear wife goes, "Did you see the email from Steve Wood?" So, what a mess. So, we're not here making a profit. We do this because we love our church. And George graciously gives us time. We both don't need the money. And that's how this works.
I need the money, but
yeah, just because you bought a house now, you're a homeowner. Okay, Jill. Yes, she goes, "Did you see the email from Steve Wood?" Yes. "Did you talk about it on your show?" Oh, okay. Now she cares about the show. So, that's so sweet. So, interesting. Keep the ACNA in your prayers. There's obviously some structural troubles they're going through. And if there's information that George and I don't know, we can't report it. But from what we know and what's made available to us and to everybody else, I see difficulties in how things are being conducted, so much so that people who have worked for the ACNA since the beginning have been in contact with us and have given us the same story that Rachel has given us, that Runion's given us, and that many others have given us. Everything we hear has been supported by other sources that have been there the whole time. So, that is what it is. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 926 of Anglican Unscripted.